our their staff and Steve Bryant's around here as well is going to participate. So, for those, I think I know everybody here, but my name is Matt Harrington. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwestern Vermont Chamber. Thank you to many of you that joined us on the annual meeting a couple Fridays ago. And this is part of the programming, this is part of the education. As we said, part of our vision is to inform, educate, and activate. So we think our role not necessarily is to tell you what to do or how to think, and sometimes that's different for other chambers. Our job is to provide the platform for you to learn, for you to become informed, to share those connections, to learn from other people, and then to activate the way you see fit. And obviously the chamber will be there along the journey the whole way. So with that, here's somewhat of the format for today. It's kind of casual, as you can see. It's why we hosted it in beautiful places like the Dorset Inn. We'll go around specifically to our senator and a few of our representatives that are here today. We give them an opportunity. Do not run away with it, but we do want to give you all an opportunity to talk about who you are, what's been your experience up at the Capitol, because that's very important to the people from Bennington to Dorset, right? Like, we don't have that touch point that so many of other Vermonters do. So I think it's very important for you to come down and say, here's what's really going on. And so provide the committees you're working on, and some of the bills and things that you're working on, and some of the things you're experiencing. We've got a great group of members here. Some of them are solopreneurs, some of them are business owners, some of them own franchises, some of them are healthcare, and some of them are nonprofits. So really, you can speak to all of that. So we'll go around to each representative, senator, and have them say their piece. That usually takes us to about halftime. Halftime. We'll refresh with a coffee if you need to, and then come back for Q&A and just have some general conversation. But we like to get that kind of knowledge out there and for all of you to really understand how the process works up there. And then from there, you can kind of springboard into some questions that you might have for your own organization, for your own town. It's one of those times with weather and sickness. We do have a couple representatives that are under the weather or do have health appointments. One of them is Kathleen James. She was sorry that she couldn't make it here today. I really want to reiterate that this is one of her favorite events to come to. She loves hearing from all of you, but she did have some other medical appointments that she needed to get to. And we just learned that Dave Durfee, Representative Durfee of Shaftesbury, is under the weather as well. He wanted to be respectful of everybody and not get sick. We are missing a couple others, so as we need to, we can kind of talk about what their committees are and what they're representing. But with that, let's start with, I'm going to start with Senator Bongartz, all right? And he will go, and then I will kind of pick on other reps as we go along. Now we're going to sit about halftime. Sound like a good plan? All right, good.
So good morning everybody. I live, just for those of you I don't know, I know most of you, but I live in Manchester, represent Bennington County with Rob Plunkett, the other actually Bennington County, plus Stratton and Londonderry in this end of the county, and Somerset and Wilmington on the other end of the county. We poached a couple from Wyndham County to make the numbers work right. But Rob, incidentally, is a prosecutor, as you know, and he has to work on Mondays. That's part of his deal for POP legislation. So that's where he is. He's at work. I serve on two, in the Senate you serve on two, House you serve on one committee, in the Senate you serve on two. I serve on the Natural Resources Committee in the morning in the Senate. That's where I spent most of my attention during the time I was in the House, where for the last 4 years I would say that we have done more to promote housing than has happened in the last 30 years. Whether it's the changes to the way the zoning works, or to even, for the first time in its history, some exemptions from Act 250 to make it easier to build housing. But in that committee, I think the focus this year is largely on following through on all the things that we passed a lot of legislation that put a lot of responsibility on towns, the regional commissions, and the Agency of Natural Resources over the last 4 years. think for the next couple of years, it's gonna be oversight, staying in touch, understanding how it's working, whether it's unfolding the way we envisioned it, and not putting more on top. Because one of the things the legislature sometimes does is pass something and, oh, that's done, and then move on to something else. This is a time when we need to really refocus and make sure that all the work we did the last 4 years is implemented properly, and that as it relates to housing and natural resources. In the afternoon, I chair the Senate Education Committee. You're going to be hearing a lot about that topic this year, the next couple of years. As you know, the governor has made a proposal to, I'll use the term radically, I'm not saying that pejoratively, radically reform the way that we deliver education in Vermont and the way that the property tax structure to pay for it works. He has put together with Zoe Saunders, for whom I have enormous respect, have put out something that is going to take a lot of effort to fully understand and then think through and then shape the actual legislation that emerges. It's not going to be quick, it's not going to be easy, there are 1,000 moving pieces. But as you know, the proposal is we have right now 52 supervisory unions and 119 school districts for about 85,000 kids. That can't possibly make sense. What we do with that statement is something that we have to think through very carefully. What the Secretary of the Governor's Office is promoting is a reduction to simply 5 districts. So where this is going to end up, it's way too early to tell. The whole proposal isn't even out yet. It's continuing to emerge. We had the piece on governance in our committee on Friday. So we've got a long ways to go. And frankly, what I'm going to do as chair of that committee with the people I'm working with and the whole legislature, I think, is just kind of stay calm, not get caught up in the hysteria of something being said somewhere and something, and therefore it means this. Well, it doesn't mean that. What I think is the governor's office has put forward a good faith proposal, really trying to do something to help lower property taxes and make our education system work better. But that is an easy thing to say and a really hard thing to do. So all I can say is that we're going to methodically and carefully work to get there. And I'm going to leave it at that. By the way, I will say, because one of the drivers of healthcare, of the cost of education is healthcare. And I don't really know yet exactly what the committee is working on, but I do know that the Senate Health and Welfare Committee is talking about doing real structural reform to healthcare in Vermont because we have to. Because in some level we have to, because double-digit increases are absolutely unsustainable. It's driving school budgets, it's driving the cost of business. You know all the things it's driving. We have to do something about it, because if we don't, it is by definition influence. So I don't know enough about the details of that, but I know that that's their goal this session is to really work on structural reform that will help lower the cost of health, bring the cost of healthcare under control. So I'll stop. Thanks.
Thank you.
Happy to answer questions.
Next, we'll go to Representative Nigro.
Hi there. For folks that don't know me, Mike Nigro, District 5, Bennington District 5. And my wife and I run a catering concessions business. We've been doing that for about 9 years. Prior to that, I worked about 20 years in healthcare, most recently quite a long time, about a decade in home healthcare. So I sit on the appropriations committee, and most years when I say that, people would say, well, you're doing the hard work up there. And this year I'd say, nope, Seth in education's doing the hard work this year. So I guess I would just broadly talk. We just voted out of the House the budget adjustment for last year's budget, where we tidy up, make changes based on actual results halfway through the fiscal year. And I'll tell you a few notes on that. And we are just starting work on the 26 budget. just within the last week. So I am starting to get my arms around the governor's proposal of where things are at. I mean, a few broad just reflections is, first of all, from a revenue standpoint, the state has been doing really, really well. At the mid-year check-in on our budget, we realized we had an extra $230-some million in revenue. And the economy in general, despite how individual pockets might be affected by it, but in a general sense, the economy in Vermont is doing extremely well. The governors, economists, and the legislature's economists completely agreed on this, that the economy is really strong, revenue projections are really strong, and if it wasn't for one detail, which is uncertainty about federal funding, that's a big detail. But if it wasn't for that, I think our outlook on the finances of the state would be really, really strong. We're kind of pinning that statement right there with the fact that we have no idea about what's going on with federal funding. It's a daily question. We're trying to figure that piece out, and that could make us change our statement about our financial standing in Vermont very quickly if federal funding becomes a significant problem. So a few other just kind of reflections on, some of the things that we noticed. Revenues were up. We did notice that our budgeting in the state, we've seen a lot of areas where we missed our targets, our projections pretty significantly. Some of those, even though we're getting farther and farther from the pandemic, we do think some of that is still related. Medicaid as an example, during the pandemic, nobody was kicked off Medicaid, the rules were kind of changed. It kind of left us in this period when that ended, where we weren't sure how many people were going to be on Medicaid moving forward. So it made projections very difficult. So kind of across the state budget, I will say the Appropriations Committee is definitely looking at the places we missed targets somewhat significantly. We would, obviously those are always projections, they're not going to be perfect. But there was a decent amount of variation. It's something we're thinking about going into the next year. Again, some things like sports wagering, the income related to sports wagering, that's new. So we kind of expected some of our estimates to be off. Sports wagering actually came in lower than anticipated. It turns out that more people won than were expected. Cannabis has brought in a good deal more in the budget adjustment. We added an additional $3 million from the cannabis taxes. We definitely see that leveling out, though. We don't think that's going to continue to grow significantly. And on the other end of that, liquor taxes have been down. I think in general, what I would say about the budget adjustment is I feel like it was fairly fiscally conservative, fairly cautious. We've taken $133 million of these additional revenues and we're kicking them forward into the 2026 budget. So not spending a decent portion of it. We did add some additional spending, particularly around housing. Decent amount of extra, I think it's $8.6 million to Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So again, there is a big focus on housing, and so some extra money was spent there. The majority of our committee's recommendations matched the governor's, which I would just broadly say, because I think you asked for kind of reflections on just how things in a broad sense of the building are. And I think I heard a little bit of this from Seth. There's a real recognition, and this is my second term, and compared to the first time I was in the House, there's a real recognition across the parties that we have to work together on all of these issues. And I think that was reflected in the budget adjustment. And the funny thing is, if you look at it, it broke down on party line. The vote for the budget adjustment was a party line vote. But sometimes that doesn't tell the whole story. The truth is, the concerns of one party was on a very small portion, 2% of that budget adjustment that was done. And in a general sense, I think most people agreed that most of the budget adjustment was reasonable, responsible, and so focused on 26 budget. A lot, like I said, just starting to work on that right now, and waiting to see what happens with federal dollars. It's going to have a big impact on all of our discussions moving forward.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go over to Representative Greer, who is our freshman representative. So you can give us perspective of like, hey, I got to the building, and this is crazy. So,
I was gonna say,
Will Greer from Bennington.
Yeah, thank you everyone. I didn't prepare anything. I didn't know I was going to be speaking with somebody. Oh, is this better? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a camera.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Seth, for that, because I'm now known to get me in trouble, so let's not do that. So, anyway, so since this is a business meeting and this is a chamber meeting, I thought I would just emphasize some of the tax things that are going through the legislature. There's going to be a lot of changes to the tax code, it sounds like, or at least efforts to get there. Ultimately, Ways and Means will have control over that. There's one to eliminate the Social Security tax on benefits that people get, so that will be one thing that goes through. I sponsored that, as well as a lot of other people. The governor, of course, reiterated his help for veterans and getting rid of the military pensions tax, which we still have. And there's also some sales tax exemptions that are going through that may or may not affect some of your businesses. So if it does, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to discuss, what the proposal's about. In terms of what I'm working on, let's see, I'm working on quite a bit. In terms of our committee, so I'm on Corrections and Institutions, and so we oversee the Bennington Battle Monument, specifically, as it concerns that recent article that just came out about the $40 million it's going to take to prepare it. So we'll see how that goes. We're hoping to get more federal support for it, but again, that's all up in the air right now with the new administration. In terms of how I feel about the building, it's very different being on this side of it rather than just sitting down and hearing other people talk about it. It's a very interesting environment. I mean, it's not what I was expecting in the least, but anyway, yeah. So that's, I mean, I don't know how else to summarize it, but yeah, it's a learning experience. We're all learning and growing at the same time. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
All
And we'll have time for people to ask questions. This just helps us kind of frame our questions in mind. And so, lastly, I think in the building here, at least for now, is Representative Pritchett. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
This is an interesting one, and you'll have to help explain to us because you're really on Bennington-Rutland border.
Yeah.
And so you kind of split the counties. So welcome yourself.
So I'm Chris Pritchard. I represent Rutland, Bennington. So I have Middletown Springs, Rupert, which is in Bennington, Pollitt, Timoth, and a portion of Wells. I share about a third of Wells. Patty McCoy, who's our minority leader, has the other third. I guess I want to talk a little bit about being a newbie. It's been very humbling for me to be able to sit in that shape. We had an orientation process. I got to meet a lot of great people, Will being one of them. And a lot of freshmen we formed a little club, I guess. We meet frequently. We've already had our second meeting. And we talk have open dialogue about a variety of issues. And it's refreshing. There's a few bills that Will has come out that I signed on, and I know there's some bills, the forestry bill and the veterans exemption that Will signed on to. And it's good to see that that happening, I guess. So the orientation process was great. None of us, I don't think, really knew what we were doing. It was quite overwhelming, but it was extremely helpful. It gave us some idea of what to expect. I have been assigned to the Committee on Environment. So one of the things that the committee environment deals with is fish and wildlife issues, which is important to me. I grew up here, I lived here all my life. So part of my identity, and I guess part of the state's identity, is around a lot of fish and wildlife issues. And we're seeing interesting perspectives. So we've been talking about beavers for a while and how they can play a role in flood resiliency. And then we're dealing, one of the things that we're dealing with, and I think is an issue, and you know, we have about, I guess, 8 or 9 bills on the wall right now. We haven't taken any of them off to start discussing. And really what the first month, and I don't know if this has been the case for well, but the first 4 weeks for us has been education. That's what it's been. You know, we've talked about, our chair, Amy Sheldon, has tried to, you know, give us education on PFAS, on phosphorus, on nitrates, on chloride, on wildlife corridors, on, you know, a whole list of topics. So we've had a lot of folks come in and just testify and give, you know, give information to us. So when these bills come off the wall, we'll be able to be educated and try to make the right decision, you know, for our constituents. So, you know, my focus, a lot of my focus has been, I've tried to focus on local, my constituents. I have about 9 or 10 of them right now that I'm working on things, and I've made them a priority. When they call, the State House waits, and I deal with their issues. And a couple of them I've been able to resolve, and it makes me feel good. And it makes them feel good too. So that's been my primary focus. That's why I want to go there, to help people in my district, you know, deal with their problems and be a voice. And a lot of the legislators, the senior ones, have been a great help to me. You know, I had one lady that had a fraud issue, and I really didn't know where, you know, to go with it. So I talked to some of the people who've been there a while. You know, I bounced around for a while, ended up in the Attorney General's office, and we worked on it together, and we got it resolved. So I'm just kind of learning how to navigate these different problems. I've had animal control officer issues and fraud issues. I'm going to be introducing a bill that's drafted. I actually have to I have a meeting in the Legislative Council about 3 o'clock this afternoon. I have a constituent in Timoth that had a concern. Her husband was murdered. The person that was convicted of the crime was a multiple felon. He had multiple felonies, multiple misdemeanors, and there's a law for, in place now, Act 12, that allows good behavior in jail to reduce sentences and up to 25% of what your sentence. And she had a concern for that. So I have introduced a bill, I'm going to introduce a bill, that basically is going to state that if you're convicted of a second felony, you will not get the exemption of that time served. I think at some point people have to be accountable, and she wanted it to originally to be based on a violent crime. The state has no definition of violent crime, so it was so broad. So we thought the best way to do it is, you know, I put that idea forth. Ben in Legislative Council and Eric thought that was a good way to approach it. The chair of Will's Committee, Alice Emmons, who's a representative from Springfield, was wonderful. She helped me navigate through this process, go to the Department of Corrections, and just really held my hand through this whole thing. So people on both sides of the aisle have reached out to me and worked together with me, and I'm very appreciative of that. It's been a good experience so far. It's been like a fire hose. It's starting to turn down a little bit, and I think we're starting to get our feet. You know, I think we all just want to do the best for the people we represent. So thank you for having me here today.
So, this is that halftime we were talking about. So, if you need to go to the bathroom, think through those doors. There's at least 2 of them. More coffee can come out. And we can kind of roll right into questions if people want to do that, but I just want to give everybody the opportunity to get up. I think I'm going to kick it off with the elephant in the room, and then everybody can kind of come up with their other questions here. What I'm hearing, and not necessarily from a business community, just from a community perspective, is feeling very powerless to the federal issues that are going on. And a couple of people have reminded me that, part of this is, because part of the argument is, well, what could one of our representatives or even senator do when we're talking about federal administration and things like that? And some people have said, well, it starts there, right? I mean, kind of, they represent us, who then go to the House, who then work with people like Representative Balint and Senator Sanders and Senator Welch. And so I think it starts here. And so I think, and I'll use a very kind of pointed demonstration of this, and I don't think she would mind me sharing this. Our young professional chair, we're so supportive of our Shire's young professionals, and they've just grown, and they're 125 members now, and they're really kicking up the tires now. She lost her job on last Monday. She is unemployed right now. If you know Carolyn, she is a dynamic person. She does international nonprofit work. It's why she's the SWVT chair. But I think that brings it home, right? So one of our own already, and I'm sure you all have some stories about that. I don't want to get into the semantics and arguments of the political left or right, but I think it's more of a question to our representatives and senator of, what are you seeing at the House level? What are you seeing at the national level, even as you're interacting with representatives and senators there, or national delegation, or even the governor's office? What, are you getting a sense of anything? Is there some, if there's some fervency? Is there some calmness? I mean, what's going on there? So if you could just anyone speak to that kind of, is it kind of crazy in the last 2 weeks, or what?
I think there's a concern for it. I mean, it's a third of our budget. I mean, the funding is a third of our budget. So the uncertainty of that, I think, causes some causes some concern.
Yeah.
And how do you prepare for that?
I was just going to say that, of course, our Attorney General is taking, a legal approach on several things, so there's certainly some challenges that the Attorney General's been working on. I do think, at least in the House, it feels to me like there's a lot of concern, there's a little more caution around performative acts. And what I mean by that is, the first time I served, I think there were times that we wanted to put out resolutions and constantly kind of advertise how upset we were about what's going on at the federal level. And I think there's a feeling in a lot of the House right now that put up roadblocks in our own building and produced no results on a federal level. So I will say, compared to previously, I feel there's a little more hesitancy to take performative actions. We are certainly thinking about, again, from a budgetary standpoint, we're certainly thinking about what steps do we need to do. And I think it's probably part of the reason for the caution in the budget adjustment is, again, we need to take a very cautious approach from here forward.
You want to touch that stuff or not?
Well, I'll only add, you talked about the person here who lost her job. Vermont's agricultural sector relies on a lot of workers, and not all of them are documented. And if that were to come unglued, we'd be in serious trouble. I will say I walked out of the building, had lunch with actually Amy Sheldon, who said Amy Sheldon, Amy, a couple of days ago, and outside there was a pretty large demonstration of just people coming from all over Vermont saying, we don't like what's going on, this isn't right. And we're not even a month into the new Congress and the new president. Again, I don't want to get political about this either, but there are real world, the third of the budget.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, migrant farm workers and the person you talked about, I mean, there's a lot going on here. And if nothing else, we're going to spend the next 2 years navigating, trying to figure out how to navigate through this. And I think, though, that the real change, or to the extent that we need to have our voices heard, it's going to come like it often does from the grassroots up, get up through the legislature, hopefully, in parts. I don't know. It's way too early to know, but it's concerning. Yeah.
Just a follow-up on the education. They're talking about education department just kind of going away. What does that look like in Vermont? You guys gotten into any thoughts about how that might impact us? Going through what you're going through anyway.
I don't really even have a total handle on how much of our budget for our, but I know a lot of it does. You may have a better sense of this, because you may have dug into this a little already. But how much of our education finance and
It's a decent amount of money. It's a meaningful amount of money for Vermont. It's not the big federal dollars. Medicaid's the big federal money.
yes, I really don't know where you're just going to end up having to navigate as things happen. It's too early to know what's going to stick, what's not going to stick. There's a lot of chaos right now.
Well, stuff we're dealing with already.
Question on education, and you probably don't have the answer, but I'm gonna ask it anyway, because it does impact economic development and real estate. As you know, in a lot of these towns down here, we have school choice already. Okay, so how is that gonna look like it might work? Because we're talking about everybody getting assigned to a high school and then having a lottery for school choice. But what about
Yeah.
all these towns with school choice?
Let me just, in case you don't know this, I chaired the Vermont board for 15 years.
Yeah.
I understand school choice,
Okay,
and I understand its importance to this area. It has a long history, and it has done tremendous good for our students.
Yeah.
And I am absolutely committed to having that remain and come out the other end. And the other thing, you're alluding to this, and this is really important. These schools, whether it's Burton, let's use Burton as an example, has a sacred relationship with the towns whose children it serves.
Absolutely.
And that sacred relationship is not going to be undone under my watch with a lottery that says some of those kids have to go somewhere else, because it's the foundations of that school, and therefore and backwards to the communities, is that relationship. And it's sacred and it's critically important, and I'm well aware of its importance.
Can I piggyback on that as a parent of high schoolers?
Yeah.
And I've said this before in a legislative meeting, but I think Vermonters have to be really careful with the term school choice, because it means something a little bit different to us when you're talking about what the current president says when he says school choice. They're not the same thing. Vermont's history of school choice is not a voucher system that takes money from public schools. It is a completely different thing. And the fact that we use the same term to mean what this is kind of a slippery slope.
The more loaded term is vouchers.
Right, exactly.
Because there are no vouchers in Vermont.
That's
There's no such thing, and anytime you hear somebody use that term, they're using it purposely to conjure up something else, just as you're alluding to.
Exactly.
So anytime you hear somebody using that term, they are doing it, it's never an accident. They're doing it purposely because they're trying to mislead people about how the system actually works. Vouchers are in a system where they're, what we have in Vermont is we have some districts that do not operate schools. They are non-operating districts. And therefore, they tuition their students to other schools. Vouchers are when you have a system of public schools and money's being taken out of public schools so that people can send their kids to church. That's not what's going on here. When you talk about, and the other term is private schools, by the way. When they use that term, they're doing the same thing, because these are independent schools. And the difference is that we're not talking about Chilton and Andover. We're talking about schools that take every kid, and many of them focus on the poorest kids in their district, or in Vermont. So it's the opposite. What we have here is really, really important for the reasons that all of us understand, and we're gonna make sure that is happening. Yes.
We're up here with education, so I work at Southwest Tech, our career technical high school, and a lot of work, I think, over the last 5 years have gone into creating a non-competitive funding formula and governance for CTE. So I just want to plug that. I hope CTE doesn't get lost in all this conversation about 5 districts and this and that.
Yeah.
You know, I already saw there's a bill in the House, H37, to align the school districts actually around the CTE lines that already exist. So I just wanted to plug the CTE, not get forgotten, and that it not still be a competitive funding formula.
You are absolutely right about the CTEs, the value of the CTEs. They're critical to the system. We haven't even talked about CTEs yet in our committee. We're still focused on the 2 big pieces of this, which are the governance model and the way that the property taxes work. And then we're going to work down to that. But the CTEs are critical in getting that. What's scary about this, frankly, to me, is that there are literally 1,000 moving pieces. We have to get every single one of them right. And that's a big one. That's not down to this whole, but we have to get that right.
Seth?
Yes.
Sean Marie?
Yeah.
You know, I've been reading, as you probably are aware, there are many pieces just for all of you. If you go to any, especially the Ed Committee in both the Senate and the House, you'll find all the documents that have been presented to both the House and the Senate. And there is a 35 or 40-page plan from Ms. Saunders, and it addresses the tech centers, it addresses all the things in the plan. I'm not saying that's the plan, but it's all there in black and white and it pretty much mirrors a plan that was put forward in 2019 by Dan French, who was actually the superintendent in your area. And it talks about the CT centers, it talks about independent schools, it talks about all of that. And I think it's very much modeled on the 2019 plan. My question to you, from kind of a broad stroke, is in all of this reading, I haven't seen anything on how this will improve the outcomes for our students in the public schools. I can tell you from reading the paper today that, you know, people in Taconic Green are already worried about how the choice for BBA and Long Trail will be there. But on the same 2 pages later, you see 3 students recognized for presidential scholars from Zoe Saunders. And so I want to know how this plan, north to south, will improve the outcomes.
Well, number one, it has to. So let's start with that. And I will give Zoe Saunders credit that as she has talked about this, she starts every time not with property taxes, not with owned properties. She starts with excellence. And she starts with talking about the fact that we need to do 2 things at once here. And if we don't, it's a failure. We have to improve education across the board and educational outcomes across the board. The words excellence has to be at the top of what we do and how we end up coming out of this. At the same time, we're trying to figure out how to help people pay their property taxes. So I don't have the answer to that yet, but it is top of mind. My committee, we spent an hour and a half one day when we had a couple witnesses canceled on us. We had some extra time. And we said, what are our touchstones? What is it that we're really looking to accomplish here? Opportunity for all is at the top of the list. And that's what, and opportunity for all, excellence, nimbleness, letting principals setting up a system where principals can run their schools, where schools can be nimble, and districts can be nimble, and so those kinds of words are at the top. I don't want to take all the time here.
This is your conversation, so this sounds like this is the conversation people.
So I had one legislator say to me, this isn't directly responsive to your question, Sean, but one legislator said to me, well, if we're going to have 5 districts, why don't we just have 1? We've only got 80,000 kids, that's not even that. And I found myself, I hadn't really thought about it before she said it, and I said, you know, I think we should have at least 5 districts, and by the way, I suspect we'll end up with something more than that. But we should have at least 5 districts, because if this thing is working right, and this gets to the notion of excellence, if this thing is working right, we're gonna see maybe 3 districts doing okay, and 1 or 2 excelling. And then the question will be, why are they doing so much better? Why are they excelling? You need to have something to compare against. And you need to have, I don't want this to be monolithic, because monolithic means mediocrity. And there has to be ways for creativity to take hold in the classroom. And by the way, this notion of, and I have said this to Secretary Saunders, I know she's not thinking this way, but I have said the notion of uniform curriculum sounds mind-numbing. Because you have to let teachers be creative in the classroom, and I know she's thinking work, she's a creative person, she's not thinking monolithically. But we have to make its goals, outcomes, and then let teachers, be creative about, 3 teachers sitting around and coming up with some idea for something interdisciplinary that will combine physics with, I don't know what else. But it's something that's hands-on, and we have to let that kind of creativity take place and not have it be so prescriptive that, anyway, so that's the right question. I'll just say that, I'll say that much. That's the right question, and it has to come out. And, so I want the day to come when the public schools are competing with like Burnham and St. John's and others for students. And that's where we need to be. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean that everything is raised to that level of excellence, and that's the goal. That's what we have to be looking to achieve out of this. So thanks.
Oh, wait, I want to go back to CTE because I think that is such a huge part of solving a bunch of issues in the state. Our housing issues, the trades. I mean, part of where we're trying to go with energy is that, we're supposed to be on a path to install 186,000 heat pumps. We don't have the people to do that. They just don't exist in the state. We have housing issues that have come to the top. Everybody's concerned about housing issues. We don't have carpenters. I think the CTEs really play a significant role. And it allows, I worked in Manchester for 27 years. I worked for Jim and John Hand. I was their service manager in the dealership when they were in business. And, I worked with Jeff Holton and Eddie Panzarino on Project Graduation to help kids that were most likely not going to go to college, had no plan, no future in front of them. And the programs that they helped do changed people's lives. When I went to Subaru to work where the dealership Jose owns, I worked with Darlene McGlory at Stafford Tech, and probably had 2 or 3 technicians out of their program come. They come in for a couple blocks during the day. One of them is probably the top technician that Jose has right now.
We do it now. We have 5 kids that are going to graduate. They'll have a full-time job. We will help them buy their tools. In 5 years, there'll be a Subaru or Ford, because we have 2 stores. Master Tech, we would have paid for all their education, so they will have no debt. A senior Master Tech makes $40 an hour and clocks in 50 to 60 hours a week while working 30 to 35. And they are. This is important. I mean, it's a crisis to get cars repaired or build houses or do anything. I live here in Manchester. To find somebody to replace a door, I literally went to RK Miles and did it myself because it was 14 weeks to have somebody to come over and replace a door. So the technical schools are the heart and soul of that, and I think we need to, take the stigma away from it and push these kids to actually explore this.
And we're keeping them here.
And we're keeping them here.
Keeping them here, which is huge.
That's
It's huge.
My husband was in the trades since 1986 until he got terminally sick. And he predicted this in the late 80s because he saw no one younger than him was coming into the trades. I work for a nonprofit. One of our key employees went through Career Development Center, and she is who she is with the skills she has to support not only our nonprofit, but nonprofits throughout the county, because she started with one of the local high schools. She went to CDC at the same time as high school. She went to college and she got her master's. And I don't think she'd be the person that she is today with the skill that she has if she didn't have that grounding education between high school and CDC.
So this is a great segue into our next program, which will be a roundtable on workforce and education. But Rava, I'm wondering if you might serve up a little bit of what Southwest Tech is working on. Even in the conversation we had here was just, what are you finding to be your top 5 courses? What are the ones that kids are asking for? And I think part of why I'm starting this up for you, Rob, is to also, because we have our legislators in the building, so what do you need? What does MAU need? What does the greater county need? Do we need a second one? Like, help us understand where we might be able to marry this education trail that we're carving out with CTEs and Southwest Tech. But if you could just kind of introduce the concept and maybe some things that you're seeing over there.
What did I get myself into?
Welcome to board. All right, okay, well, here we go. So, one of the things that I should mention that I oversee adult technical education. What a lot of people don't know is that career and technical education also serves adult students. So I enroll over about 100 adult students each year in programs like nurse assisting, commercial driving, welding. We have a massage therapy program this year. We ran butchering in the past, tractor operation. It spans the gamut. So I oversee that, but I'm other duties as assigned and involved in a lot of the daytime operations of the center as well. I'm one of the administrators there. So one of the things that CTE leaders have been focusing on probably since about 2019 is a funding formula that is non-competitive. I can't explain all the details of it because it's very complicated and I don't understand all of it either, but essentially our county, right, Southwest Tech serves the whole county. You all vote on our budget. We have to establish a tuition, and that tuition is what we charge to each high school for each student, all right? And then what happens is that the state somehow through their educational funds reimburses high schools for the vast majority of that tuition. However, it's not all the tuition. And so there are in some ways built into the system's disincentives for high schools to send students to CTE because they have to pay for it, right? And it comes out of their budget. And yes, you will eventually get reimbursed for that, but again, not all of them. Right? So we've been asking for a long time for a funding formula to be developed that is non-competitive, that gives CTE the money it needs up front without having to bill high schools constantly for however many number of students they feel that they can send. At Southwest Tech, we're very lucky. Our high schools in this county support the tech center. That is, BVA, Arlington, and MAU, where the vast majority of our students come from because our buildings are connected. We do also technically serve Long Trail. We serve homeschool students. We serve Grace Christian. And we also get students from Hoosick Falls who come across the border to go to our school as well. So, but that's been the big ask. There are also many different governance structures for CTE across the state. Southwest Tech has its own governing board. We set our own budget. We don't have to ask MAU for money to buy things, which is really nice. But not every
there's just gonna be one big CTE district, whether there's going to be 3 CTE districts, that's, I think, it's gonna land one of those 2 places. There've been many studies about this kind of stuff that are also being looked at, so you probably get to look through those as well. There's been studies about adult education that Sean Marie knows, that's talked about the necessity, well, the recommendation that perhaps adult education and literacy and adult career technical education be merged together more effectively, because we are really 2 separate systems right now as well. So there's a lot going on there. At Southwest Tech, I would tell you that all our programs are popular. Most of our programs are full or very close to full. Usually the most popular is auto technology. We usually have a long wait list for that. We cannot get every student who wants to be in that program in. Building trades is usually full. You'll be glad to hear that. Our forestry program is generally pretty full. We get a lot of students from BBA for forestry. You'd be surprised how many students graduate high school because of forestry that probably would not have graduated otherwise. It is a program that's a good fit for them. Medical professions is very popular. I'm going through all the different floors of our building. Sort of visual. Culinary is very popular as well. For those of you down our way on Thursdays and Fridays, our restaurant is open if you want to come have lunch. Courtesy of the culinary students. The most expensive thing on the menu is only $15. We also have a graphic arts program that's popular. We have cosmetology, which is usually full. So there are a lot of different types of programs that we have, but no offense to any of them that I didn't mention here, but we have 13 programs, I believe, plus all the adult technical education programs.
Is pre-law is it a adult learning course or
Daytime.
Yeah, we no longer have a pre-law program at this point. That program's closed due to low enrollment.
Are you working with industry to help expand capacity in some of these programs? Like for me, if you come to me and tell me, hey, I need to buy a lift or subsidize a teacher or whatever it is, I'm pretty sure if you ask any dealership in Southwestern Vermont, I would open my checkbook right now.
Yeah. So auto is interesting. No, it's not equipment or teacher or anything like that. It's space.
Okay.
We're maxed out in space. Our building is maxed out in space. We have explored over time perhaps another place to run an automotive technology program that would require hiring a second. I'm going to get into some weeds here, but that would requiring a second teacher. That would require hiring another administrator to oversee a site, because you can't just have a teacher on a site. You have to have an administrator too. And you would also have to have a paraprofessional, because there are certain number of people. So if your checkbook is very big, I don't mean to mock, but there are a lot of administrative and structural issues that go into expanding programs, because we have ratios that we have to have. We can only have a certain number of students in the classroom because of safety. So the max we can have in auto is 21 at any point in time, and that's with a paraprofessional there as well. So all these things come into play when we talk about expanding programs. It's not, we've had any number of people come and say, hey, could you have this program, or could you have that program? And yeah, that's a great idea, and here are the 19,000 steps that have to happen. And oh, by the way, that program has to be approved by the AOE, right? So if they don't think it's a good idea, it's not happening, right? So there are a lot of structural challenges within there, but yes, absolutely, those are the things that we would like to do. We would love to get more students into building trades, right? One of the things that we talked about on the adult education side is there's no incentive for anybody to train to be a carpenter because the state doesn't license carpenters. My bread and butter are programs on the adult side that you have to have a license. You have to be licensed to be a nurse assistant. You have to be licensed to be a commercial driver. But you don't have to be licensed to be a carpenter. So you're going to spend that money on tools and letters for the side of your truck, right? You're not going to spend that on coming to train with me for something you can figure out on your own. So there are a lot of different challenges there for career tech ed right now, but funding and governance are the big ones.
I think it's all the way around. I'm running into that. I'm trying to sponsor robotics in schools in southern Vermont, Rutland South, because you have Rutland Robotics, which we work with, and I'm trying to put a program in every school that wants it. Like I'll buy the kids, pay for the membership, send the teacher to school to teach the kids. It's 2 hours a week. Yep. And I've been trying for 5 months to do this, and I haven't had a single school take me up on it, which is crazy.
It's crazy, but to defend schools, we're being asked to do so much right now, and we don't have the resources to do it as it is, right? And I'm really worried with this 5-district thing, that the idea is to eliminate a whole bunch of administrators, and we'll save a whole bunch of money with less superintendents, but then who's gonna do all that work? It's not like people are sitting around in school offices with their thumb up their ass with nothing to do. I'll just be honest with you about that, okay? Everybody's maxed out. There are so many mandates that come from the federal government, that come from AOE, and half of them are unfunded, including adult technical education that I do. It's on there that you have to have this person, right? But there's no money for it, right? So I'm expected to raise the revenue for the most part to cover my own existence. And so that's one of our concerns is that, you know, we're gonna have one superintendent overseeing from Bennington to Middlebury. Like, come on, like there's gonna have to be a whole bunch of assistant superintendents all over the place running these schools. So you're not gonna save, eliminating administrators is not a, you know, like changing district lines is not gonna fix everything. There's deeper structural issues within this, and that CTE is also wrapped up in that as well.
I think you need to combine some schools. I mean, there's some, how many established schools that have 15 kids is a problem.
So one of the connecting dots I want to make for this morning, and I know Erica and I have encouraged this for many years. I think, again, with some of our board members here, Rob is on our board. So one of the strategies of the chamber, we like Rob, but also the strategy was that we needed to build a more robust, diverse board. And part of that was education and workforce base, and part of that was making sure that we had a better understanding of both the school system, but also that adult education, kind of the skill-based thing. Part of the connection I just want us to think about is the chamber has a handful of programming. What we talked about in the beginning was, you know, our job here is to inform, to highlight, to give a platform to, and then to activate. That activation part is where we hope, especially with our 2027 vision, you spin off into tribes, spin off into task force, spin off into the ability for Rob, a senator, and 5 dealerships who say, hey, we've all got our purses open now. Now we've really got some cash that we can get some things moving on. To have a progressive conversation is why, and Rob will be doing some of the facilitation for the Workforce and Ed Roundtable on March 6th, which we'll have down in Bennington. So again, part of this is a prelude to a roundtable that we have a little bit more of this conversation. We don't have to have it take over today. But the hope is after that roundtable, 2 or 3 of you get together and go, that's a really good idea. What if we did this? And I think this county has to kind of move in that direction, even though we have constraints, as Rob has highlighted. So just, I want to put that kind of picture in your mind. I don't want education to take over the breakfast, but the idea is that we start the conversation, and then our hope is that we can help facilitate kind of task forces that pop up. You don't need a title. Like, I'm not a big fan of committees. I'm a big fan of getting stuff done. So get the right people at the table going in the right direction, right people in the seats, and move forward. So thank you, Robin. And
No problem. Yeah,
you're more than welcome to still stand up there, but I don't or a target.
It's like the senator said, though. I mean, there's going to have to be some really, really difficult conversations, you know, to actually make all this stuff work. I mean, you know, when you think of Vermont, you think of small towns and their little schools, right? Like those, we can't have it both ways. If the taxes are too high and you're running incredibly expensive little tiny schools, like something's got to give, right? I mean, when I first moved to Vermont, we lived in Wardsboro, right? And that's not the smallest school around, but Wardsboro was a small school, you know. The grades are combined, right? Brothers and sisters go in the same class. I can't remember. You know, and so we're going to have some really difficult conversations here about our whole system that impacts our workforce as well. So, great. Thank you. Sit down.
Will, I saw that you had your
I
hand
was
up.
gonna say, can you send us the details for that now?
Yes,
So
yep.
March
we will
6th
send-
coming out.
We
March
will, and it's at, Angry Egg, Erica,
Yes.
at 9 o'clock. I have it up on my thing. No. 8 o'clock to 9:30, Angry Egg, and Workforce and Education, what we call Focus Roundtable. Fostering opportunity, collaboration, and unique solutions, focus. So please go to that. We have a couple of those throughout the year. We will send that information out. There's also programming on the website too.
I would like to switch topics
Yes,
completely, if that's okay.
That's what I'm referring for.
I'm Colin McQuaid, I'm Juniper Lane in Bennington, Vermont. It's a cultivation and retail dispensary. I am the former chair also of the Cannabis Retailers Association of Vermont. I just gave that up a couple years into that, I'm really great. But I came today really because I wanted to put some faces to some of my representatives. We have a lot going on in the state, like it was already spoke about. Cannabis is one of the biggest revenues and the newest big revenue that the state has had in a very long time. We've outpaced alcohol, which is huge, like that's huge as a state, and I feel like one of the things I've been working toward personally and with my colleagues is to get more of a voice in the state house. We were up there lobbying last week and I missed the snow, but I've done that quite a few times at this point, and there's a lot of issues that are really affecting this industry that can be helped, that need to change, and they have to change on a legislative level. We have advertising restrictions that are draconian. We have to prove that 85% of anyone that walks past my store is 21 years old if I want to open my blind. That's insane. I can't do any type of normal advertising that any business in the whole entire, everyone else would do in this room is not allowed for me most of the time. There's little tiny workarounds, and they include a lot of hours of work that go into being able to present anything. That has to change for us, especially on the southern border. My biggest competition is not local Vermont businesses. My biggest competition is across the border in Massachusetts, 15 minutes away, and clear sky. And I have to always compete on pricing, but they advertise into our state, and I'm not allowed to even do the same. And that's really, really become like an issue. Like I literally constantly have people saying like, oh, we didn't even, you know what I mean? We're going down to Massachusetts, and I just can't, it's hard. You're not able to kind of compete with that in any way. I mean, I have a better store, I know that, and better products, but that's a real thing. There's also restrictions on our concentrate levels, so we can only sell 60% concentrate where they can sell whatever they want. I can only sell 30% flour, they can sell whatever they want. And all that stuff starts to affect us, we have lots of more stores opening in Vermont. We're oversaturated as a store, as a state. Not so much in Bennington County, but we're at 5 dispensaries in Bennington County now. That is way too many. I know some of these other stores are really struggling. Luckily, I have a great location. I was the first one there. I've heard products, but I know some of these other ones, as you get to a point, we're at more stores per capita than Oregon, which had an almost failed cannabis system. And their revenue is bad. They went back to a black market way almost, we ought to protect this growing industry is what I'm asking for, is just and then we have to try and expand it. So you're saying it's capped, but it could not be, right? So because if we allowed for a cannabis event, if I could have a catering at a bar at a wedding, which people come to Vermont for weddings all the time, it's a huge industry for us. If I was able to set up a cannabis bar, which I've been asked to do so many times, I've had to say no because it's illegal at this point, but why can't I get the same considerations as alcohol? I mean, that's pretty common sense. So I really would urge you as legislators in our state to protect this industry and help us to grow instead of making us all the time, making it harder on us, making us more stigmatized, and making it so we can't even present what we're doing. This is something Vermont should be proud of. We have the best weed in the country. This is something we are doing it in a different way than every other state. We're really allowing for small industry, and we have to be able to promote that. Right now, we can't even promote that to other people and say what great things we're doing. So I just really wanted to ask for what your reflection on is in cannabis. We talk about it. I know we're making money. I pay the taxes every month. But we're doing really good as an industry, and I think I just wanted to ask for more consideration.
And we should point out that Colleen, you're also the vice president of the Bennington Corporation.
I am vice president.
So Colleen is also very active and a leader on Main Street in Bennington too. So I think there's a lot of stigma that goes around the industry, that industry, and at the same time, Colleen's serving for community as well. So thank you.
I really try to do that. That's part of my goal.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to just interject because that lobbying day was actually helpful, some of the information they presented. So you talked about oversaturation, and they had mentioned that about how we have I forget what it is.
119 stores.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounded like about 1 for every 5,000 people, and that it was more than Oregon. And I'm just curious what, we can continue this conversation outside of here, but just kind of what you'd want to see from the licensing standpoint of the state, whether you think the market can regulate itself on this matter, or whether the state would need to step in.
Right now, the CCB has proposed rules, which I just commented on, and they're having a rules hearing next week on them, and they're proposing a retail siting, which was the legislator made them do last year to propose like this many stores for this population. Right now, they would allow the city, under their proposed rules, I haven't been edited yet, which will get at least edited a few times before they go. It'll allow for 6 dispensaries in Bennington town, the town of Bennington. We cannot handle that. Multiple people will end up, if there's not enough, like literally there's just not enough business. And we're in a state where everyone grows their own weed too, a lot of them. So it's just like that would be too much. Where if you looked at 5 to 6 for Bennington County, we're at there, and that's probably more reasonable, So I don't know what the exact answer is, but it's like 1 per 5 to 10,000 people is pushing it, like it needs to grow in numbers, and it can't just, I don't know where the balance is. There's just all this talk about like direct to consumer. I am just gonna personally say, I don't think that is the solution to fixing the oversaturation of our market. And I think that anyone that's selling to a consumer needs to have a retail license.
All right, thank you, and we can follow up.
Yeah, we can follow up.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. Just any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, what's that?
So you mentioned obviously you're working on reducing restriction for building houses and that sort of stuff, and it's a two-parter. 1, what are we doing for businesses, and 2, what is the accountability side of the legislation, the laws that have been passed to the permitting agencies in the state to make it easier for businesses to actually come to the state and develop. I'm trying to build a 31,000 square feet, $12 million facility for the Subaru store in Rutland right now. I bought the property 2 years ago. I'm $500,000 in permits and re-engineering because nobody knows what they're doing. And I still don't have a permit. If I was in New Hampshire, I'd be selling cars out of that building.
I don't have an immediate answer for you. What I can tell you is that part of the legislation that passed last year is focused on Act 250. And Act 250 tends to get blamed for everything that happens in the agency and all the other agency permits, but just to separate for a minute. The legislation that passed last year makes it possible. It's going to take a year or so to get there, but for cities like Rutland to within certain zones, and it would almost certainly include where you are, to be exempt from Act 250.
Yeah.
And the rest of what you're talking about is agency permits.
Yeah.
And that is an ongoing challenge.
It's
And
a nightmare.
I'm aware of the challenge. Stormwater discharge and all of those things are very complicated, and we're just beginning to. The same thing Wilbur mentioned that I think it was Chris mentioned that the beginning of this session in the committees has been review and finding status, and that's what we're doing right now.
And it's accountability too, because it turns into a quid pro quo situation where, I want to approve your permit, but you got to treat the water that comes off of state property on your land and add hundreds of thousands of dollars of retention ponds to treat my water. Well, if I do nothing with the property that I just purchased, nothing happens. And they hold permits for this stuff, and it's just you're held hostage. I almost had to hire an attorney to get a permit through, which is insane. If we're gonna want business to come to the state and we wanna have people that are gainfully employed and we have to stop exporting our youth out of the state, which is what we're doing, we need to make it easier for business to actually come here and thrive. And that is not the case today.
Thank you. Other questions?
I just wanted to, can I add on to?
Yes.
So are you specifically talking about that 3-acre rule around water quality, or you're just?
No, I have a 14-acre parcel that I purchased in Clarendon 2 years ago. It was an existing dealership that went out of business.
Right.
So it's already an existing dealership.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it took me 2 years to be able to get to the point that I could apply for an Act 250 permit. 2 years. I've done engineering drawings like 14 times to meet different agency requirements, and you know, a couple $100 an hour, that adds up quickly.
You're not alone. The Mount Anthony School Board 20 years ago did the same thing.
It's insane.
We had to turn the building around.
Senator Bonner, it's Paul Perugio. Carrying on with that comment, I wonder if you could, along with your Act 250 reform process, build in some sort of accountability measures along these same stories. These are, I've heard dozens of these, but to come back on those agencies you speak of for reformation and reprimanding, maybe like a policing. There's this fear amongst the developer community that you can't challenge your engineers, you can't challenge your attorneys to go after these agency people, because the comment that comes back is we have to continue to work with them from that side, and we as real estate people say, well, what else can you do? I have an email from a Stephanie Giles that says to the town of Winhall, no matter what you do, please stop this project. I have no control over this person, but it's a bad project. And the town gave me this email, I said, wow, how can I send this to the whoever, state police? I don't know, is there any way to build in some sort of a system to go back on the agencies?
It has been, this issue has been around a long time. It's an administrative issue. It's, with the governor, they work with the governor. But it's something we continue to look at, and I'm aware, I definitely understand. I've actually been on both sides of this myself in terms of permitting, so I understand the issues. But it's complicated. Sometimes it's, believe it or not having enough people to do it, and sometimes it is people who, as you suggest, aren't as responsive as they should be. But some of that is under the control of the administration, frankly. But building an accountability is a worthy goal, and it's something that we need to continue to look at. I understand it.
Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody. I especially want to thank Senator Bongards, Representative Pritchard, Representative Greer, Representative Nigro. Did I hit everybody from the representative senator angle? Okay, great. And then our members, thank you so much for joining us today. A reminder, go to our programming webpage. We'll email that out. We'll have a roundtable coming up on workforce and education. We've got a bunch of new programming coming out this year. And then from the legislative side, we're continuing to do our Monday Matters. You'll see that come in your inbox in the next 30 minutes probably. So that's weekly. We update you from a business perspective, what's going on at the State House. We are exploring some telecasts with our public access channel to do some, what do we call them, Erica? Discussions from a national level to our Main Street from our national delegation about what's going on at the federal level. We have again picked up on those concerns from the community perspective. So we're working on a way, just like we did during COVID, where we were talking with Levine and Trey Dobson and stuff from an emergency medical perspective. We heed every member's kind of thought process here and saying, we might want to treat this a little bit like an emergency too, or at least being able to, again, inform you, give you good education, give you a good platform, and then activate as you see fit. So we're working on that, hopefully to roll that out in the next couple of weeks and looking to do weekly, if not bi-weekly, discussions with Becca Valen, somebody from the Sanders team, somebody from the Welch team, even some of our local reps too, if they'd like to join us on kind of just, again, calm, maturity, conversations being had, making sure information is shared. So we have all that coming up, and then the last plug I'll make, and then you guys are free to network and do whatever, eat more food. We will be having our fall legislative lunch. I don't know if I've talked to Maru about it yet, but we'll probably give you a better information. I have a way of doing that with my being back down at the Mount Anthony Country Club, as we have done so often, to welcome the Vermont Chamber, Amy Spear and her team. All our legislators are more than welcome to come. We find it being a very dynamic conversation between the Vermont Chamber and our legislators, so we encourage legislators to come, but more so our members to come to, we really view the Vermont Chamber as a partner, especially from a lobbying perspective, especially for small business and nonprofit perspective. They have just much more capability to do the day-to-day up at the State House, so it's great to have Amy and her team down, so we'll be doing that in October, I believe. So go to our program, we inform the heck out of you guys, so you'll know that way in advance. Thank you all so much for coming in. Another round of applause for the Dorset Inn for